It's such an honor to be here with all of you. It's an honor to speak after my sister Hindu, who is always spreading revolutionary change wherever she goes. And also just to be with folks who've joined this call, especially in these times of ongoing crisis. And I just always want to take a moment to wish everyone good spirit, good health, and joy in wherever you can find it these days. My name's Bridget. I use she, her pronouns. I'm originally from the Bronx, but I'm based in Brooklyn on unceded Lenape territory. And I've been working with the Women's Environment Development Organization for 10 years now. And WEDO is a 30-year-old organization, always working at this intersection of women's rights, environment, and sustainable development. And we've been actively engaging in the climate change negotiations since around 2007. And I myself since around 2009 with the Copenhagen talks. And I really hear Hindu's piece on the need to kind of be at every meeting to really understand the process, which is both a truism as well as a challenge and something that causes injustice to who can actually effectively participate in these meetings. Our goals as we do in engaging in the climate negotiations have always been twofold. One is to address the gender blind nature of the outcomes under the UNFCCC at that time. And then the second was to increase the participation of women, particularly from the global South, at all levels of leadership, including grassroots and Indigenous women's participation. And when we started working in this space, some of the primary strategies included co-founding alongside some other leading feminist and gender organizations, the Women and Gender Constituency of the UNFCCC, which for any of you who are going to be engaging in COP for the first time, I'll put information in the chat on how you can get connected to the Women and Gender Constituency. And we also launched what's called the Women Delegates Fund. So I wanted to lay a little bit briefly the landscape of participation, women's participation at the UNFCCC to give you a snapshot of what that looks like. The average participation of women across all national delegations, so delegating negotiating bodies, has increased from 30% in 2008 to 39% in 2019. And during COPs, the heads of delegation were at the low rate of 15% in 2008 and have increased to 21% in 2019. But that has actually fluctuated across the board. Women make up less than 30% of board members to the Green Climate Fund, and all of this varies widely depending on region, with lower rates of participation of women in many least developed countries. So in 2009, WEDO launched the Women Delegates Fund, specifically aimed at supporting the travel, training, and leadership of women from the Global South to be part of their national delegations. The WDF has sponsored 378 trips to the climate negotiation sessions for 143 women. And I mention that because, as Hindu said, again, it's been a commitment to supporting the consistent participation of women, not just to one meeting or one COP, but over the course of 5 years to both intersessionals and COPs so that they can build leadership in their delegations. We've also trained over 500 women through on-site trainings and night schools prior to each of the COPs and negotiating sessions. So in just the 2 minutes that I have left, I wanted to give you some good and bad news and what we need next. So the good news is that there's more and more studies and findings that indicate that nations with higher proportions of women in parliaments and in decision-making are more prone to ratify environmental treaties, have greater tendencies to create protected lands. We see women gaining power across the board in the UNFCCC, as seen by some of the participation rates that we've seen there. And several networks exist and mentorship initiatives have been launched, including the SUPSTA chairs last year, SUPSTA being one of the bodies of the UNFCCC. And as Hindu said, this understanding that if we're going to really build power in these processes, we need to build networks and build solidarity to do so. We know the UNFCCC has a gender action plan now. It's squarely recognized women's leadership and gender equality. And while in 2008, as mentioned, there was only one reference to gender equality in the decisions of the UNFCCC, we now have more than 80, including foundational language in the Paris Agreement. The bad news is that women seem to be gaining power in spaces with less power. There are less, when we see that women's participation as heads of delegations drop at COPs, at the big conference meetings where decisions are taken on boards and bodies in relation to science, technology, and finance. We have less women's participation. We've even measured how often women speak in meetings such as the Green Climate Fund, and found that when it was just the board members, that men accounted for 93.2% of the time spoken. So there's ways in which we measure the quality of participation as well. The current rate of change, we would really only reach gender balance by 2040. There's not enough attention to intersectionality, women in all their diversity, including LGBTQI folks, gender nonconforming people, people living with disabilities, and the same issues that challenge participation of many further exacerbate gender inequality. So access to information, language justice, disability justice, and the reality that our global visa ecosystem really upholds white supremacy, and it poses huge challenges to the participation of folks from the global South. So I think we need true inclusion. As one of my Indigenous siblings said earlier this year, recognition without action is a death sentence. There's a trend in all of these spaces towards tokenism, and as Hindu has pointed out in the fight for the recognition of the voices and the rights of Indigenous peoples, we can't just sit by with recognition. We want real leadership and access in these processes, and we need real investment in feminist organizing and governments to really come forward with climate finance pledges that show investment in these activities, as well as in frontline feminist organizing as well. So I'll leave it at that.